So welcome to the Tree of Life class. We'll go for about 30 minutes this evening. Get some Tree of Life in. We're talking about Malchut, the kingdom, and for the last couple of months we've been looking at Malchut in Matthew, Malchut, kingdom in Matthew. Last time, not last week, because we were having technical difficulties with Skype, and so we were not able to do this class. But the last time that we did the Tree of Life class a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about that it is not easy to be a citizen of Malchut. In effect, saying that it is not easy, I'm trying to think of how to put this, in that it is not easy because the walk itself is difficult, the life itself is difficult. And we are warned by this, through Yeshua himself. We are warned that this life will be a difficult life. That it's not going to be easy for us, and not to think that it's going to be easy. In fact, we are warned by Yeshua himself to be careful to count the cost, he said. To understand what it's going to take, what it's going to cost. Because the emunah, the faith, the confidence, the trust that it takes to be a follower of Yeshua is not what is usually prescribed by modern day Christianity, modern day preachers and teachers. We're living in an age and in a society where people go by the nominative of Christian or Messianic or Hebrew root or Jewish or these kinds of things, and yet they're not truly that. To say that one is Jewish, to say that one is Messianic, to say that one is Christian, is simply to take on a title for ourselves. But words mean things. And these titles have meanings, they have significance. There is in fact a relationship between the term Christian and the term Messianic. That they both come from what we would call the same root. Not the same language, but the same idea. Christian comes from the Greek word Christos, which means Christ, which means anointed. Messianic, the Hebrew word Mashiachi, comes from the Hebrew word Mashiach. Daniel comes from the Hebrew word Mashiach, and it also means anointed. And so you have these two terms. Now the distinguishing characteristic of Mashiachim versus Christian is that as Mashiachim, we conclude that Torah is applicable to us today. Therefore we often use the term Jewish, but it's actually not, it's Jewish in essence, in a sense, but actually it is Torah. That we're following Torah. We're following the prescription of Torah. It becomes Jewish when we get into the externals of it, so to speak. As in how many braids on our tzitzit, wearing the kippah, wearing the talit, and these kinds of things. These are all Jewish. But the Torah proscribes for us that we wear tzitzit. It does not tell us how. It does not tell us how many braids or these kinds of things, how many strands. These things are given to us through the Chasal, the sages, and through the Ralim, the rabbis. So there is this distinguishing characteristic. But for the Mashiachim, we believe that Torah is for today. We keep Shabbat, we keep the festivals, all of these things. Whereas in Christianity, the major part of Christianity believes that Torah does not apply to us today, that Shabbat has been moved to Yom Rishon, has been moved to Sunday, and it doesn't have to be kept as Torah observers keep Shabbat. So you work on Sunday, you play on Sunday, you go to the store, you go shopping, you go to the restaurants, you do whatever on Sunday, just so long as you go to church, Sunday school first, then it's okay. Whatever you do, you go to these things on Sunday. But for the Mashiachim, this is not the case. For the Mashiachim, we're not to shop on Sunday. You don't carry money. You don't do things on Shabbat that you do on the other days. So you have these characteristics. For the most part, Mashiachim do not celebrate Christmas and do not celebrate Easter. We do celebrate the resurrection of Yeshua by saying that we celebrate the resurrection of Yeshua. Yes, he was raised from the dead on Yom Rishon, on Sunday. And we celebrate that through the season, through the Moed of Pesach, the festival of Passover. We celebrate the resurrection. But what I'm trying to say is this: to say that I am Mashiachi, to say that I am Messianic, is to say that I am a follower of HaMashiach, that I am a follower of the Messiah. Who is the Messiah? Who is the Messiah? Yeshua. So it's to say that I'm a follower of Yeshua. What does it mean to be a follower? In Hebrew terms, in Jewish terms, in rabbinic terms, it means that I live as he lived, I do as he did, I speak as he spoke. I live my life in the style that he lived, in which he lived his. That I am walking in his footsteps. So the things that he would have done, that's what I apply to my life, that's what I would do. Those things which he would not have done, those are the things I do not do. Saying what? Well, we know that Yeshua was Torah observant, was Torah obedient when he walked on this earth. So that is saying, if I call myself Mashiachi, that I'm following in his footsteps, well, if he was Torah obedient, Torah observant, then I too must be Torah obedient, Torah observant. Otherwise, I am not truly Mashiachi. I am whatever, but I am not Mashiachi. I am not Messianic. Now, if I put those in Greek terms, if I were to call myself a Christian, and that's fine, but if I understand these things, it's fine if I understand what I'm saying. If I'm saying that I'm a Christian, then I'm saying what? I'm a follower of Christos, which is what? Greek for anointed, the anointed one, right? Which is the same as Mashiach, which is the same, Messiah. Okay? All of these terms are pointing to the same thing. If I am calling myself Christian, that means I am a follower of Christos. Who is Christos? Yesu. Who is Yesu? Yeshua. You see, they're just Greek terms for these Hebrew terms. That's all it is. It's a translation. How do I say Yeshua in Greek? Yesu. How do I say Mashiach in Greek? Christos. So how do I say a follower of Mashiach in Hebrew? Mashiachi. How do I say a follower of Christos in Greek? Christianos. Is everybody with me? You understand this? So it's just a matter of language here. What I'm saying is that if I'm going to say that I'm a Christian, that's saying that I am a follower of the Messiah. If I'm a follower of the Messiah, that's saying that I'm a follower of Yeshua. If I'm a follower of Yeshua, this narrows this broad concept that most people today have of Christianity. It brings it into a very narrow thing. And so this is why we call them nominative or normative Christians. That is, that they're Christian in name only. Now, I'm not just picking on Christians because the same is true with some Messianics. They're Messianic in name only. That is, they call themselves Messianic or Hebrew roots or what have you, but they're still breaking Shabbat. They're still out there breaking the Sabbath. They're just not going to church on Sunday. They've moved all the Sunday things to Shabbat, to Saturday. And for this I will use the term Saturday because it's not truly then a Shabbat. If I'm doing everything that I used to do on Sunday and I'm now doing it on Saturday, and those things are that I get up in the morning and I read the newspaper and I watch some television while I'm having my breakfast, and I get in my car and I drive to church, right? While I'm in church, as the hour approaches noon, I'm looking at my watch, waiting for it to get there, right? And then noon comes and the preacher says, in Jesus' name, amen. And the entire congregation with one accord departs the building, runs across the parking lot for their cars, right? Jumps in, because we've got to beat those people, that crowd over there, we've got to beat them to Luby's. Right? Or we've got to beat the Assemblies of God or the Presbyterian to Luby's. Right? I go to Luby's, have a great meal, the waiters and waitresses serve us and all of these things. I leave, get in my car, drive home, take a nap, get up, do some house cleaning, hang up some laundry, mow the lawn, do this, that, whatever. And that's my Sunday. Now, honestly, this is the common thing. This is a commonality on Sundays today. These are the things that happen on Sundays. If I simply take all of that and transfer that to Shabbat, it is not truly Shabbat. You're doing the same thing. This is why I say, no, it's Saturday then. It's just the common day. Shabbat, remember what he said, remember to sanctify Shabbat, to set it apart, to make it different. If I'm doing all the things that I would normally do, what is the difference? So there are those who call themselves Mashiachim, who call themselves Messianic, and they get up on Shabbat morning, they read the newspaper, they watch some TV while they're having breakfast, they get in their car, they drive to shul, they drive to synagogue or to assembly. They go through the liturgy, they listen to the teaching, they start looking at their watches, they get out, the rabbi or the teacher says the bracha acharot, the Aaronic blessing. We do kiddush, and they're out in the parking lot, go to their car, they drive to the restaurant. There they're greeted by a cashier, a waiter or waitress, who are working on Shabbat on my behalf. They're serving me. What does Shemot, Exodus chapter 20 say? Remember Shabbat to keep it holy. For this day is sanctified unto Adonai. On it you shall not do any work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, for it is a Shabbat unto Adonai. Now, if I'm not even supposed to make my animals work on this day, where do I get it that I can make another human being work on this day? You see the point? If I'm not even allowed to make my ox or my donkey work, they're supposed to get the day off too. Then how come I can make, and people say, well, because they don't believe. So, does your ox believe? Does your donkey believe? I have sheep. I have not found one of them that believes. Not one of them are Torah observant. You guys have animals? Are any of them Torah observant? Are they Shabbat observant? No. But I'm still not allowed to make them work. In fact, the animal, which is lesser, the animal or the unbelieving human? Which is the lesser creature? Which is the lesser creature? The animal. If I'm not even allowed to force to make the lesser creature do work, why am I supposed to, it's okay to make the greater creature do work? And the truth of the matter, one of the things that we understand, that we see in Etz Chaim, the tree of life, is that I'm to look at every human being as B'Tselem Elohim, created in the image of God. Not just at me or us, because we're special. Every human being is created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And so if I am running from shul, I'm running from synagogue, from assembly, and I'm going to a restaurant, number one, I'm having to pay. So I'm making bargains, I'm exchanging currency on Shabbat, which is forbidden by the prophet, in the book of Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah. We are forbidden from doing these things. In fact, when he went out and saw that they had their booths all set up on the Shabbat, he threatened to kill them all. And they said, oh, we're not going to sell today, we're just setting up shop. And he said, don't even come near the city and set up your booth until Shabbat is over. This is where we get the tradition that you don't buy or sell on Shabbat. It comes from the Bible. It is a biblical principle. People say, well, I don't find it in Torah. Well, there are some things that we don't find in Torah that God develops later on, though. Huh?
Yeah.
We don't find the crucifixion in Torah. Not per se. These things are developed as God works with His people. It's just like what we were teaching on Shabbat. You know, you have all of these covenants. One is developed beyond the other. And so it built. So you have the Adamic covenant, the covenant that Hashem makes with Adam. The day that the soul sins, the day that you sin, you shall surely die. And then you have the covenant with Noach. I will not again destroy the world with water. I will do it next time with fire. And then you have the covenant, the Brit Avachar, the covenant with Abraham. And then you have the covenant with Moshe and Bnei Yisrael. And each covenant does not do away with the past covenant, it simply builds on it. More revelation, more revelation, more revelation, all the way down to Yeshua and His covenant, what we call the Brit Chadashah. Every covenant is building on the covenant before. So what I'm saying is that if I do that, and then I go home and I take a nap, well, taking a nap is good and it's permissible on Shabbat, but if I get up then, and I'm doing the dishes, and I'm out mowing the grass, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that, I'm working on work from, I brought work home from work or from school or whatever, and I'm working on that, and it's Shabbat, guess what? Am I a Sabbath keeper? No. There are two rules concerning Shabbat, and that is this. You do not do what you would do on any other day. And number two, how do I know what is work and what is not work? How do I know what is considered rest and what is considered work? It is these things. The things that involve the act of creation, as in what God did on the first 6 days. This is work. And I am to refrain from these things. So, when I ride on a board, when I write on the board, if I do this, well, I put a line up there. And the rabbis say, okay, well, that's permissible. You haven't really created anything. But the minute I do this, what have I done? I've created the letter. Correct? So, now what? Now what? Now I've created a word. So this is considered an act of creation. You see how this is? This is why you're not supposed to write on Shabbat. I'm explaining. I'm just explaining. I'm not criticizing if you do or you don't or whatever. I'm just telling you the way it works. Okay, so what I'm saying is if I call myself Mashiachi and a Messianic, but I've just transferred everything from Sunday from my Christianity over to Shabbat, what kind of a Shabbat is this? That's all I'm saying. Saying this, if I'm going to call myself, if I'm going to go by the name Mashiachi, Messianic, then I need to live as a Messianic. That is, I need to live as a follower of Mashiach, saying what he would do on Shabbat, I do on Shabbat. What he would not do on Shabbat, I do not do on Shabbat. Saying that he was obedient to Torah, therefore I need to be obedient to Torah. Why? I am his follower. And so this is why I say it's not just among Christians. It's even among Messianics. That we call ourselves by something and yet we don't do it. So what we're saying is this, that if I follow the lifestyle of Mashiachim, the Messianics, which is Torah observant, which is Torah obedience, pertaining not only to keeping Shabbat, not only keeping the festivals, but applying all of these things to my life. Yeshua says to be careful to count the cost because, in effect, this will be difficult. This will be a difficult life for you. Why will this be a difficult life for me? Because you see in another place in the Torah, the scripture tells us, God told Bnei Yisrael that these things are not too difficult for you. These things are not too difficult for you. Yeshua says that my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And yet he turns around and he says what? Before you follow me, you better count the cost. He tells them that if we were to be followers, if we're to enter into Malchut Cheshamayim, the kingdom of heaven, that we must take up our cross and follow him. What does it mean to take up a cross? The cross is an object of what? A symbol of what? Of easiness? Of selfishness? Or is it a symbol of suffering and sacrifice? Loving the multitudes. So we're to take up this symbol, we're to take up our cross and follow him. Saying that in contradiction to what many preachers and teachers, televangelists, what have you, would tell you today, that this lifestyle is not easy, and not only is it not easy, but as time passes on and as we get closer to the coming of Mashiach, this lifestyle is going to become increasingly more difficult. To what extent? To the extent that many in the last days, in those days, many in the time of the coming of Mashiach will lose their lives for living this kind of life. Why? For the very reason that it is separate, it is distinct, it is also holy. And that which is in the world is unholy. and hates. The darkness hates the light. The evil hates the righteous, the good. The unholy hates the holy. I'm not going to get political. I'm just going to say this as to where we're standing today. There is a reason why this country feels like it's tearing apart. It's falling apart at the seams. Between the government, the Republicans, the Democrats, the people of the nation and such as that, there's a reason why it seems like we're being pulled apart at the seams. And the reason is this. We do not think about this as we go about our daily activities and we hear the news and all of these things that are going on. But there are forces at play. There are forces at work, I should say, that we cannot see. For example, the scripture tells us that every nation has its angelic master, its angelic Lord. If it is a good nation, then that messenger, that malach, is for the good. But most of the malachim, most of these beings are not good. What we're literally seeing taking place, you can't see it with these eyes, but what is literally taking place is that there's a war going on. For the destruction of this country, for the destruction of this nation. Why? The destruction of this nation is necessary for the destruction of Israel. We're coming to the 50th anniversary, just a few weeks, of the 1967 Six-Day War. Happened in the 1st of June. And it was 50 years ago that the Israelis recaptured the city of Jerusalem from the Jordanians, and recaptured the Temple Mount and all that is there. And we're going to be, in a couple of weeks, we'll be showing you a video about this. But I did my senior thesis, and then I did a college thesis on the 1967 Six-Day War. And one of the things that a lot of people do not know is the involvement of the United States and Richard Nixon. That Richard Nixon was greatly responsible for the Israelis being able to win that war. Excuse me, it was not Richard Nixon. He was not there at the time. I'm sorry, I was thinking about the 73 war. But anyway, I believe it was Lyndon Johnson. But anyway, either way, in any case, yeah, Nixon came in 68, so it would have been Lyndon Johnson. But either way, the Russians were in control, the Soviet Union was in control of Egypt, more or less. In other words, at the time of the 1967 Six-Day War, the Egypt had what were known as Soviet military advisors. These are Soviet officers and soldiers in place in Egypt at the time. They were also advising Jordan and Syria to a lesser extent, but particularly were very much in command. And one of the reasons was because the Egyptians had borrowed a great deal of money from the Soviet Union in order to build the Aswan Dam. The Aswan Dam on the Nile River was built basically by the Russians. And so, as repayment, the Egyptians allowed the Soviet Union to place soldiers on their soil as a block, as a counter of American influence in the Middle East. And when the war broke out, basically both the United States and the Soviet Union agreed to take a hands-off policy, to not get involved, to let them fight it out. The problem was that the Israelis, within 6 days, within 5 days, actually had captured the Suez, had captured Jerusalem, had captured Gaza, and Judea, Samaria, what is called the West Bank. It had actually crossed the Jordan River and were making inroads through Jordan and into Syria. And in fact, we're very close, very near to capturing both the Syrian capital and the Egyptian capital. The Soviet Union began to airlift supplies, armaments, tanks, and what have you, to the Arab nations. So the United States began doing the same to Israel. What was happening is it was becoming so heated, and the Egyptians and the Syrians were becoming so frantic, the Soviets were also becoming frantic, that we came very close to having a showdown between the United States and the Soviet Union. And during both the 1967 and the 1973 wars, the American government contacted the Soviet government and told them that if they got involved, that the United States would go to war with the Soviet Union and it would become nuclear. That we would shoot nuclear missiles at the Soviet Union. And it was sufficient to keep the Soviet Union out of the war. It was Harry Truman who finally agreed for the US government, because the United States government was not going to recognize Israel as a nation before the United Nations. And Harry S. Truman was finally convinced, as the vote was nearing, just a few days away, I believe, Harry Truman, the president, was finally convinced to agree. From that time, Israel has fought, I believe, 5 wars. The 67 and the 73 war, the United States got directly involved. And from that time, we have been, as it were, the protector of Israel against the world, which is what we're doing today. We are one of the few, sometimes the only nation in the entire world that stands up for Israel. This is why certain nations, such as Iran, call Israel the little Satan and call the United States the great Satan, because we are the defender. Israel, and from a human point of view, would not exist if the United States were not backing it up, militarily and otherwise. Now, you and I know differently, correct? We know that who is the great protector of Israel? Who said, "You are the apple of my eye"? Hashem. But he has for these years used the United States as a buffer to keep things in check. Well, we know that the day is drawing near for Mashiach. So guess what's going to happen? Who is the enemy going to attack? The people of God and her protectors. So what I'm telling you today is this is what you're seeing taking place. This is why this big political warfare is taking place in our capital. I'm not saying one thing or the other, who's good, who's bad, or whatever. I'm just telling you that this is what's going on. That there's a warfare taking place. Because I'm going to tell you, honestly, I don't like the Democrats. Honestly, I don't like the Republicans. I don't like either one. That's why I am not affiliated with either party. I'm an independent. I guess it fits because I was Independent Baptist first, right? I'm going to tell you something about our president. You remember what Ronald Reagan said? Trust but verify. I'm just going to tell you, I see things that scare me. I posted on the HMA page today an article from the Jerusalem Post that after a meeting with Abbas, after Abbas had his meeting with the president, that he flipped and he's ready to do peace talks. And the one thing that for the last 20, 30 years, the settlement issue has been taken off the table. No, we'll deal with the settlement issue. We're not going to worry about that. We're going to sit down and talk peace. What did the president say to Mr. Abbas? That he was able to turn on a dime like that and throw one of their main holding points out the window. It's in the Jerusalem Post today. The president is going to Israel next week. I'm just saying. I don't know. I cannot tell you that, specifically this or that. What I'm telling you is this: keep your eyes open and be aware and trust no government. Do not trust the government. They are not your friends. That was one of the things that one of the rabbis said, one of the Orthodox rabbis used to tell his people is, the government is not your friend. Do not trust the government. Because the government will give to you with one hand and take away with the other. Never trust the government. So I'm just saying, but the reason why I'm telling you all this, and we need to close, but the reason why I'm telling you all of this is because of this. You can see the darkness, you can see the clouds gathering. And we're coming to the end. I'm saying, I can hear the thunder of the storm. It's as though the battle is breaking out. And you can begin to hear in the distance the thundering of the cannons, and you can begin to see the little flashes of the light. Because there's warfare already taking place. It's already here. And in saying that, I'm saying this, that it's going to get much worse before it ever gets better. One of the great hopes from Tehillim, from the Psalms, is that the statement that it is darkest before dawn. And that gives us hope because we look forward to what? The light at the end of the tunnel. We look forward to the dawn. But in order to get there, what? You must go through the darkness. And so there's darkness coming. There's coming hard times. And we need to be ready for it. And this is to which Yeshua was speaking when he said that the way was not going to be easy, to count the cost, to be careful. Remember that he says that the way to Malchut Kashamayim, the way to the kingdom of heaven, is narrow and rough and hard. And he says, how many go in? Few. The way to destruction is smooth and easy and wide. And how many go? Many. This is what is to set us apart, literally. That we're willing to count the cost, and not just count the cost, but we're willing to pay the price. So we say that it is not easy to be a citizen of the kingdom. There's a price to pay. Remember, how many of the Talmidim of Yeshua, how many of the disciples lived good, full, strong lives and died of old age? One. Yochanan. And even he suffered extremely at the end. Most of them were killed as young men or middle age. Great suffering. But what? They were Mashiachim, therefore they followed in the footsteps of their Messiah, the Mashiach, Yeshua. And they continued to live as faithful, righteous people. All the more so in their days of persecution. Saying what? The darker the day gets, the darker the hour gets, the more faithful I need to become, the more full of faith, the more full of emunah, full of trust and confidence I need to become. The darker the hour gets, the more obedient to Hashem I need to become. Because that just means what? The hour is drawing near when I stand before Him. And I must give an answer to my life. And so, Rav Shaul warns us in the book of Romans that it is high time to wake up out of our sleep because the night is far spent and the day is upon us. That we are not to be caught, the scripture says we are not to be caught unaware as the good man of the house. If he had known that his house was going to be robbed, would he have been asleep or would he have been up and watching? Well, we're getting ready to be robbed. And most people who claim to be followers of the Messiah, whether Christian or Messianic, so many people are asleep. We need to wake up and understand what is upon us and see things for what they are. Not what these eyes see, but what these eyes are seeing. But what these eyes are seeing. What the Spirit is telling us and revealing to us. We need to be careful with these things and follow in His step. So with that, we say, Rakot Shalom Ve'Laila Tov.